kind of the beginning of what we call the progressive movement, and we talked about how the two major political parties are going to absorb kind of the thoughts of third parties like the populist party. Progressives don't necessarily have a political party. For the beginning of the progressive movement, President President Carson. Why is my brain? Okay, not president. Presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan, along with the Democratic Party, absorb the populist movement. What we're going to see with progressives is that both sides have progressives. Both Democrats and Republicans have progressive ideas. So we'll start with Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt is a Republican. He is the president from 1901 till 1909. He becomes well known in the United States for his leadership in the Spanish-American War, which we have not talked about yet. That's next week's kind of topic. But he had led a cavalry unit in the Spanish-American War to defeat Spain. This makes him a war hero. Americans really like him. He is a trust buster. He is very much about the common man. This is all just stuff about him you don't really need to know, except the cute thing that the teddy bear is actually named after him. Although that's kind of a juxtaposition to that picture, but there you go. Okay. Dan, teddy bear, and I have Teddy Roosevelt in the back of the room over there in that box with the yellow film.
So it's totally happy.
With his little glasses, his little spectacles. Okay. So what is there to know about Teddy Roosevelt? Teddy Roosevelt is kind of the president for the common man. He sees big businesses as sometimes good, sometimes bad. And he supports unions. He supports workers' rights to organize with each other and try to guarantee themselves better pay, better working conditions, and so on. In 1902, the coal miners, which is a kind of a large part of the country's energy, relies on coal, right? Because you use coal to burn or to boil water into steam, and things are steam powered. The coal miners go on strike, and this is a kind of national crisis because it threatens to create a coal shortage or an energy shortage in the country. These coal miners go on strike because they want a few simple things. They want an 8-hour workday, they want fair pay or higher wages, and they want their union to be recognized by their companies, by their coal companies. They want to have the right to unionize or to collectively bargain together. Roosevelt is going to bring both the strikers and the coal miner kind of leadership to the White House to discuss how we can move forward, how we can negotiate. He negotiates this deal. He essentially threatens the coal company that if they don't end the strike, if they don't give the workers what they want, then the federal government will take over the coal industry and nobody will make a profit. And that is what eventually ends the strike. The coal miners get what they want, and it demonstrates that, at least for the most part, Teddy Roosevelt is pro-union. The only time that Roosevelt is against unions, if unions are using violence, he does not like the idea that unions should be mandatory or like you have to join a union if you work for a particular company. So Roosevelt's pro-union unless the union is violent, unless the union requires mandatory membership, and he doesn't like radical unions. What he considers to be radical unions are anyone who challenges the power of the federal government, the power of the government to put down strikes and so on. He is known as a trust buster. What that means is that he spends a lot of his presidency breaking up big monopolies and trusts. He kind of breaks them down into two categories. He considers some trusts to be good trusts, companies that might dominate the market or monopolize the market, but they bring quality goods at a low price to consumers. He thinks that's okay. You can have a monopoly if you're not taking advantage of the people. He thinks that companies that exploit their workers or exploit their consumers, those are bad trusts, and those are the ones that he targets. In particular, he targets Rockefeller Standard Oil Company, as kind of the, thanks to Ida Tarbell and her work history of the Standard Oil Company and exposing these ruthless tactics of Rockefeller and the Standard Oil Company. He goes after the railroads, but particularly, he's not going after so much Vanderbilt as he is going after J.P. Morgan. Because J.P. Morgan not only owns a large portion, or is part of a trust that owns a large portion of the Northern Railroad, he's also got the money, and he thinks that he's above the law, that he can do whatever he wants because he is wealthy. And Roosevelt does not like that mentality. He promises the American people a square deal. A square deal means the 3 C's. Control corporations, provide consumer protections, and conserve natural resources. Control corporations, that's the trust busting, that's the breaking up monopolies, that is ensuring that these corporations are not exploiting people that work for them or consumers. Consumer protections, we're going to talk about here in just a second with things like the Meat Inspection Act, the Pure Food and Drug Act, some of these other things that are instituted by the government to ensure that things that we consume or things that we buy are safe. And in terms of conservation, he is kind of what we consider the father of national parks. Teddy Roosevelt sees all of these beautiful areas in the country that he thinks need to be preserved for future generations. He believes that those areas should be owned by the government or by the people, and that they shouldn't be developed. So places like Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Big Bend, I mean, there's a lot of national parks.
Attention jackets. The JDH shuttle leaves in 6 minutes.
All right, you have to write these 2 things down.
Please proceed to the back horseshoe.
After Upton Sinclair publishes The Jungle, that brings attention to the meat packing or food packing industry. And in 1906, Congress passes the Meat Inspection Act. The Meat Inspection Act requires that slaughterhouses inspect their animals prior to slaughter. If they slaughter the animal and the animal shows signs of disease, that they do not sell that meat to consumers. And those places that slaughter animals are subject to inspection by the federal government, by government agents, I believe, under the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The Pure Food and Drug Act requires that not just meat, but all the food you consume and the medicines that you take are inspected, that the facilities used to process those things are clean, that the medicine you take is consistent, that if you buy Aleve today and then tomorrow buy a different bottle of Aleve, that the strength of that medicine is the same, that you are not going to unintentionally poison yourself, and so on. It is also, in modern times, the Pure Food and Drug Act requires things like nutrition labels that tell you how many calories, how much fat, how much sodium, and so on is in the food that you are eating. It requires drug companies to list all of the possible adverse reactions that you could have to a medication. That's why when you guys might not yet, some of you might, some of you might not.
Loaded the endo. I tried to open it.
I've not read the excerpts from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle yet. My plan is for us to read some of that next week. I don't know if we'll get to it, but I will give you kind of some things that he says. For instance, these meat packing plants would have leaks in the roof, and those leaks would leak in like rainwater and dirty, leaf water into the big hoppers that they were using to mix up sausage, and the workers would just mix it all in and sell it. If they cut themselves at work and they were bleeding or part of their flesh ended up in the meat hopper for sausage, they just grind it up and sell it. The food that they were selling Americans was so bad that when they shipped it overseas to sell to the English, they sent it back, and they were like, "You can't, like, we're not going to eat that. That's terrible." And so these meat companies would then take that sausage, they would throw it all back in the hopper to regrind it, and they would add borax, which is soap, and they would add food coloring, and then they would regrind it and sell it to the American public.
And they're like, man, this one tastes extra clean.
Yeah, extra clean. So,
Wait, they added soap into the
To clean it from the.
disinfected or something, I don't know. Huh?
It did work.
that works.
I mean, no, you shouldn't be consuming borax.
No.
No. But they didn't care because their goal was to make money. Their goal was not to provide high quality food. It was just to make money. Okay, drugs. If you all have not yet, at some point in your adult life, you will go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription that a doctor has written for you. And before you can pick up that medicine, they will always ask you, do you have any questions for the pharmacist? Depending on the kind of medication that it is, the pharmacist will come and ask you if you have any questions, because they have to make sure that you understand how to take your medicine, when to take your medicine, and any possible reactions that you might have to that medicine. These things are all fall under the Pure Food and Drug Act.
Hey, but.
Huh?
That's the guy from
Yeah, he's the beef trust. He's deported the ham, and then the ham got sent back. So he just, and look, it's like yellow and green and stuff. He's just gonna grind it up and make it into sausage and then sell it to the American people.
Well, why not?
And to be fair, y'all, your food is rather clean, but they're still allowed to do some.
Isn't it like the organic stuff is like X amount of like pesticides and X for something?
Organic is a label that is deceptive.
There was like something that was passed that you're allowed to have like X amount of like stuff that's on.
Yeah, they're still allowed to use pesticides. They're still allowed to use herbicides.
driving.
Okay, Teddy Roosevelt regulating transportation and communication. The Interstate Commerce Act, which we talked about like maybe last week, the Interstate Commerce Act gave the federal government the power to regulate transportation or the sale of goods that crosses over state lines. He's going to use that law to increase regulation on the railroad industry to ensure more fair pricing and fair scheduling and all of the things that keep the railroad running. And also take control over telegraphs and telephone lines to ensure that they did not create a monopoly on communication. In terms of conservation, the only thing you really need to know is that, or that you need to write down, is that he is known, along with this guy here, this is John Muir, they're known as the fathers of national parks. They both understand the importance of preserving nature, and especially these places that, like the Grand Canyon, that you can't like remake that. You can't just plant a bunch of trees and then send people to that as a park. These are places that nature made over millions of years, and he believed that we should preserve them for future generations. Up until, as of right now, these national parks are still protected. You can't go in and like cut down all the trees and sell the timber. You can't go in and drill for oil or minerals. Although there is some discussion here in the last year or so about whether or not we want to keep that standard. What was your?
So no hunting?
No, you cannot hunt in a national park.
I was just wondering. I don't hunt.
And most of them you have to pay to get into. That fee you pay is like to help maintain the park, to pay the park rangers, who, take care of trash and all kinds of things that people leave behind. All right, William Howard Taft is also Republican. He's president from 1909 to 1912. He's really good friends with Roosevelt. He serves as Roosevelt's Secretary of War, and when Roosevelt's term is over, Roosevelt says, I'm not gonna run again. I think you would be really good at taking over the presidency. So he essentially endorses Taft to become the president. And Taft wins the election in 1908, takes office in 1909. Taft doesn't do a whole lot of stuff. Like in terms of importance, we remember him because he was larger than life. Oh, you don't really need to write
I
it.
just did the date, one day.
1909 to 1912. I'm skipping all his first, except he was really large.
He wasn't.
The White House had to build him a custom bathtub, because he was a rather larger than life guy. That was his bathtub.
Is there
He had rooms
can
in
you pull
it.
the picture
That's
of
not
me,
even
please?
that big.
In modern time, it's not that big, but back then, that was large.
50 pounds is huge.
I'll pull up a picture when we're done.
That is
Okay.
insane.
It's pretty large. I mean, you can tell by his picture, well, you can't really tell there, that he's a larger than life dude.
Oh, wow.
Okay, his accomplishments. What we need to know about Taft. He is a trust buster, just like just like Roosevelt was, except he is gonna break up like twice as many trusts. Big thing here is the strengthening of American influence overseas. What we see basically from the late 1890s until 1920 is a big expansion in American influence in the Caribbean, American influence in Alaska, American influence in Hawaii. We are, well, those actually start in the mid-1800s, but we are expanding to basically try to maintain control of the Western Hemisphere. In 1912, Taft is gonna run for re-election. You don't need to write all that down. What you need to know is that by 1912, Taft is not as popular as he was in the beginning, and Roosevelt decides, TR decides that he's gonna run again for a third term. And he's a little bit overconfident about his ability to win the election. And in the primaries, Taft is gonna defeat Roosevelt for the primary nomination of the Republican Party. Why is that important? This is what you need to know. Is that Taft
defeated Roosevelt?
Yes, but this is the part you need to know. Is that Roosevelt is going to form a third party called the Bull Moose Party. And he chose the name Bull Moose because he said that like the bull moose is like the most aggressive animal or whatever. That's, well, actually bull mooses are scary. Have y'all seen videos of the mooses? It's not if it's mooses, is it meese? I don't know. The moose in Alaska, like that people take living there.
Can we see
like,
it?
Yeah, they're
I
like
saw a video.
twice as big as a car.
I saw a video of a guy hunting.
Or like long guy.
Hunting moose?
Yeah, and he shot the moose and it didn't charge that.
Yeah. Moose are crazy. I've seen moose kill
Can
bears.
you show us?
Yes, after we're done though. Okay, Roosevelt, or essentially the Bull Moose Party is gonna split the Republican vote. Half the Republicans like Roosevelt, they vote for him under the Bull Moose Party. Half the Republicans vote for Taft, because they liked him and the job that he did. But because it split the vote, because that's what third parties do, a guy named Woodrow Wilson wins the presidency. Now, Woodrow Wilson is a Democrat, but he's also a progressive, okay? So this idea of progressive presidents does not always align perfectly with either political party. So, Wilson is a Democrat. He was a former president of Princeton University. You don't have to write that down. Former governor of New Jersey. He had some political experience and was very well educated. He also did a bunch of other things. Cool. All right, here's what you need to know. Wilson's campaign promise, what he ran on, was something called New Freedom. And his promise was that he was going to go after what he saw as the triple wall of privilege. Wilson saw big business as taking advantage of everyday consumers, of workers. He went after tariffs because he thought that the tariffs only benefited the wealthy. It didn't really benefit the average American. In fact, it cost the average American more money. And he's gonna go after high finance or banking that he sees as exploiting everyday average people. Unbeknownst to Wilson, though, he's gonna end up in a world war. Huh? I know it's,
Yeah, she was
I gave
also like
away
a
the-
terrible dude.
yeah, Wilson was a racist, for sure.
A eugenicist.
And what?
A eugenicist.
He was a eugenicist, he did support the American eugenics movement. Wilson, there was a movie that came out in 1917 called The Birth of a Nation. And The Birth of a Nation really revives like the movement of the KKK in our country. I would not recommend watching, it's a pretty film, Birth of a Nation. It is, essentially the storyline is this: a white woman is being aggressively chased by a black man, and the KKK have to come in and save her from these and it's not even a black man, it's white men in blackface. And the storyline is essentially that white women need to be saved from black men. And that revives the KKK. And Wilson watched it in the White House, screened it for his cabinet there in the White House, and said that it was a great movie, that it was history, what did he say? It was history with lightning or something like that. Yeah, so in terms of like his personal beliefs, no one. All right. He takes Roosevelt's ideas about national parks and creates an agency that's going to oversee national parks, which is the National Park Service in 1916. It brought 40 existing parks and monuments that had been established under TR into the fold of the federal government. The government has control over these national parks. These parks conserve the natural scenery, the historic value, historic events that have happened there, and ensure that future generations can enjoy those as well. That we're no longer here, that our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on can see the same places that we got to see or had the ability to go and see. Okay, moving on. In 1913, he passes what's called the Underwood Tariff. What the Underwood Tariff was is kind of a bit confusing. He didn't put a tariff on new things. There were already big blanket tariffs in place, and the Underwood Tariff lowers those tariffs down to 25%, or by 25%. He saw tariffs as exploiting the average consumer. Tariffs, if used properly, can benefit businesses. If a business is struggling because they're having to compete with a manufacturer in another country, a tariff will allow that particular company to kind of have a mini monopoly in the United States. It keeps their products at a low price that they can sell to the American people while pushing out the competition. What happens though when you put blank tariffs on things that you cannot manufacture is that the price of everything goes up. The people who benefit from this are wealthy people because they can exploit the rising prices. They can make themselves more money, and the average consumer is drained of all this extra cost that is costing them to buy everyday goods. So he brings that down. Now the money we were making from tariffs that we're now going to lose under the Underwood Tariff, he changes to, he says, okay, we'll just replace the tariff money with a graduated income tax. Remember that this was an idea by the Populist Party. And so the 16th Amendment is ratified by Congress and the appropriate number of states. The 16th Amendment gives Congress the right to tax individual income. And again, this is on a scale, right? So the people who earn the lowest amount pay the lowest amount in taxes. The people who earn the highest amount pay the highest amount in taxes. The goal of this is that everybody contributes based on their ability to pay, based on how much money they have access to. The 16th Amendment creates America's first income tax, and as we know, we all pay taxes still, and probably forever. Unless you work for cash, which is none of my business. All right. He also creates the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve reforms the banking industry. It brings the banking industry under the control of one particular agency. And that agency's job is to control the money supply, how much money is available in the economy, or not available in the economy, but being printed by the Fed, what the interest rates are on loans. Interest rates can really affect how much money people spend. So for instance, if the interest rate to purchase a large purchase like a house is really low, lots and lots of people are going to go and buy houses, and that's going to stimulate that part of the economy, like the construction part, house remodeling, all of the things that go along with owning a home. If the rates are really high, which right now I think the interest rates to buy a house is 6 or 7%, and I didn't mean that anyway, 6 or 7%, literally, not TikTok trend, less people are buying homes because it's more expensive. If you go and buy a house now at 6%, your payment is likely going to be $500 or $600 more per month than it would be if you were paid 3% or 2%. So you can manipulate the economy and how people spend money just by adjusting the interest rates. And the Federal Reserve, as it has evolved to be now, its job is to maintain market stability, the economic stability. You don't want hyperinflation, you don't want things to go up in price super fast, because that's harmful to consumers. That can lead to a depression or a recession. But you also want to maintain your interest rates at a place where the economy just kind of stays stable. That is what the Federal Reserve does. They regulate interest rates, they regulate these kind of large banks that then loan money to smaller banks. And we already said that. Regulate the amount of money in circulation. We're almost done, guys. We just got to get through Wilson. Wilson also creates the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC. The FTC essentially regulates business, okay? It regulates, or oversees, I shouldn't say regulate, it oversees business practices. It allows the government, or creates a government agency that individuals can complain to if a company or business is taking advantage of them. They can complain to the FTC can investigate, and if that company is taking advantage of people, the FTC can fine them, they can pull their licenses, whatever they need to do to make that business comply with federal law. We see this a lot in, maybe not so much now, but when I was a kid, you couldn't cuss on TV, like, at all. If you cussed on TV, it was a fine.
Wasn't it kind of more lenient?
It's a lot more lenient now.
No, it was lenient, like, in like PG movies, like you're allowed like X amount, but like now it can't be any at all.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's any at all now, but they do regulate these kinds of things. They also regulate, like, airline business. Let's talk about airplanes. Airplanes, if they charge you fees for baggage, if they charge you late fees, if they cancel your flight, and then you have to rebook the flight, and the new flight is more expensive than the one you already booked, and the airline tries to make you pay that, that's something you can complain to the FTC about, because that's exploitative, right? They canceled the flight, not you. They should honor the price they already offered, not try to get more money out of you. So the FTC oversees these things, oversees businesses, oversees the media, oversees really anything having to do with large, well, even large, small or large businesses. We already talked about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. You don't need to write anything down about that. President Wilson also creates the Department of Labor, another government agency. What the Department of Labor does is, let's say I go and apply for a job at HEB. Okay, I go and apply for a job at HEB, and they tell me they can't hire me because I am a woman. Is that legal?
No.
Technically, it's not legal. If somebody tells you that, that's a serious violation. I can contact the Department of Labor and I can complain. I can tell the Department of Labor, hey, HEB, this corporation in Texas, refused to hire me or even consider me for employment because I'm a female. Or if they said to me, I can't hire you because you're too old. Or,
I'm writing about that actually.
and it's age discrimination,
Do you
right?
think old people should have to
Yes.
like,
Oh, that's a whole nother topic. Yes, they should. Your faculties decline as you get older. Your sight declines. I can't see at night anymore. 10 years ago, that was not a problem. I'd a job based on a protected status. I'm a woman, my age, my gender, my religion, my ethnicity, all the things. That is something that I can complain to the Department of Labor. They can investigate that company. The point of this is to ensure that workers, right, us, the people who go to work and make money for these businesses, are protected and treated fairly, and that these companies are not taking advantage of people or discriminating against people for whatever particular reason. Okay, moving on. We're almost done with Wilson. To strengthen the Sherman Antitrust Act, he's gonna pass the Clayton Antitrust Act. Basically, it prevents the courts from using the law or like upholding laws that restrict unions. So if you have a company that is denying workers the right to unionize, they can sue or they can complain to the federal government to force those companies to allow them to unionize. Now, unions have always been controversial. So even right now, if you ask people, what do you think about a union? You're gonna get two completely different things. There are people who are like, unions are horrible, they protect lazy people, they force businesses to do things businesses don't wanna do. And then you have people who are like, unions are great because unions protect workers and so on. This is a worker protection, all right? So we think of Clayton Antitrust Act, it is a worker protection. It also says that courts cannot ban people from striking. If a company sues a union and says, these people are striking, we want the court to put it into the strike, the courts can't do that. Unless the strike is like violent, okay? They can do that if it's violent. Those state laws that outlawed child labor become federal law in 1916. And it prohibits the sale of goods created by child labor in interstate commerce. What that means is you can pay your kids to work. In fact, if y'all have ever been to like one of these local donut shops, you'll see them with their kids in there doing work. Some of the local restaurants, they've got their kids in there like washing dishes or cutting, they can do that. But what they cannot do is sell those products out of state lines. They cannot make donuts with child labor in Texas and then ship them to Louisiana, okay? And that was really meant to narrow down who could work and to prevent the like widespread practice or end the widespread practice of child labor. 2 years after it's passed, it is overturned by the Supreme Court, but we do have child labor laws now. For instance, you cannot legally work under the age of, I think it's 14. Standard age is 16, but I think 14 is the minimum. You have to get like a special waiver if you're between 14 and 16. You can't work past certain hours every day. Technically, I think it's past whatever your city's curfew is for minors. You can only work a certain number of hours per week. There are laws in place to protect the child labor laws. All right, lastly, let's talk about women's suffrage, and then we'll be done. So the traditional role of women in society has been the caregiver, right? She is the wife, she is the mother, she raises the kids, she takes care of the house. Her kind of place in society is in the domestic sphere. What we start seeing on a larger scale in the mid to late 1800s and really in the early 1900s is women challenging that traditional role. Not saying they don't want to do that role, but if that's not what they want, women should be able to have a choice. Well, here's the problem. The only way to really make change is if women have a voice, and the only way for women to have a voice is if they can vote. And there's nothing in the Constitution until 1920 that guarantees that women can there's nothing guaranteeing women can vote, and in some states it's illegal for them to do so. So we get the establishment or the kind of emergence of women's suffragists. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony are the two major players, the two people who are really pushing for women's right to vote. Let's finish up. It should take me like 5 minutes. All right, so Elizabeth Cady Stanton is a suffragist. What does suffrage mean?
Voting.
The right to vote, okay? It doesn't mean like you're suffering. Y'all pay attention. Pay attention. Suffrage is the right to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote something called the Declaration of Sentiments, in which she really lays out why women should have the right to vote, why women need to have a say-so, and that women should be allowed to follow their own desires, to create a path for themselves. Whether that means being a traditional housewife, whether that means taking care of the domestic sphere, if that is her dream, let her dream it, let her live it. If her dream is to be in the workplace, if her dream is to have a career and not have kids or whatever, let her do that. It was really all about individual right to make that decision for yourself or with your family for your, whatever's best for your family. And so she really pushes for the right to vote, because in order for women to have guaranteed protections, they need to have a voice in government. At this time, there are obviously no women elected to office either. In 1848, she organizes this convention in Seneca Falls, in which a bunch of people, women particularly, get together and they discuss why women need the right to vote. We consider the Seneca Falls Convention to be the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. So 1848, the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. In 1872, one of her counterparts or partners, a lady named Susan B. Anthony, challenges the law that says women cannot vote. Now, because women can't vote, they have no say-so in getting a law passed saying that they can. But what they can do is challenge laws that already exist. And so in 1872, Susan B. Anthony goes into her local voting booth in New York, and she casts a vote in this particular election. She's arrested for breaking New York law that says that women are not allowed to vote. And so her challenge then is, she is claiming that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution should guarantee her the right to vote. So when I say they would challenge the law, this is what I mean. You get arrested, you get in trouble, you get tried or charged with the crime. Now you can challenge that particular law all the way up to the Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court says in her case is that women are citizens of the United States, but that does not mean that they have the right to vote, at least not based on the 14th Amendment. And here is why. The 14th Amendment says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Her claim is that not allowing her to vote is denying her a privilege that's guaranteed to citizens, and that her equal protection or being treated equally under the law is being violated. What the Supreme Court essentially says is there's no law that says all citizens can vote. There is constitutional amendments at this time that say male citizens can vote. In 1890, they form the National Women's Suffrage Association. Basically, these women's groups that are working throughout the country for women's suffrage are going to merge together into like one mega group that is going to lobby for women's right to vote. It is under the leadership of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Yes.
At this time, are they also talking about like African American or only white women?
So there is a dispute between women suffragists about whether or not they should push for every woman's right to vote. A lot of these women suffragists were prior abolitionists, so they didn't believe in like slavery. They believed in some level of social equality, but there is a division because some women believe that every woman should have the right to vote. But some women within the suffragist movement think that if they ask for that, if they ask for black women to be able to vote too, that would be pushing too much. You're asking too much. You can only ask for a little bit at a time to get what you want. The 19th Amendment guarantees every woman the right to vote. There will be laws in place in southern states that will prevent black women and black men from voting too.
Was there a group specific for African American women to vote, or was it just this one subject?
I believe they're all merged together. I'm sure there are, I've never studied it, but I'm sure there are groups of African American women who.
Y'all just mentioned one, but I didn't know.
Yeah, I've never studied any of them like individually, but I do know that that there's women on both sides of the color line, if you will, that are fighting for the right to vote. All right. the success in the end of our notes. Dun, dun, dun. Wait, one more. No, I'm saying the last one is the end of our notes. Wait. Okay. So, the movement starts in 1848, but it's not gonna be until after World War I that women get the right to vote. You need to know that women's work during World War I to keep the war going, working in factories, we'll talk about that next week, making ammunition, making tanks, making guns, that contribution during World War I is going to lead to the 19th Amendment. Okay, the 19th Amendment guarantees all women the right to vote. It actually says you cannot be denied the right to vote on account of sex. Okay, so because you're a female. But they will find other ways to deny you the right to vote. It's true. Poll taxes, literacy tests, voter suppression laws. There's all kinds of things that individual states will do to try to prevent certain populations of people from voting.
I heard seventh grade had a English teacher made a plastic figures and like to show that they're.
I do it in my regular US history class. We might do it when we do the civil rights movement, because that's usually when I do it with them.